Hey, welcome, friends. I know we're going to have some other folks joining us a little bit later. Welcome to Birmingham in the UK, Tennessee, and whether it's good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world, we're thrilled to have you with us. We're going to be introducing our guest speaker, Jack Cawley, here in a moment, but just some housekeeping items, if you don't mind, so that we have the best possible experience. My name is Matt White. I'm from Chapman & Co. Leadership Institute. This is not a sales pitch, just letting you know what we do. We do work with leaders, employees, customers, and in the culture, all those areas. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about leadership and how we train, we build leaders. We've got one with us today as a guest speaker to bring us in and talk a little bit about that leadership and what it looks like. Oftentimes we find, and it doesn't matter whether we're in a for-profit, a nonprofit, government institution, we find that some of our toughest challenges are more people challenges. How we attract talent, how we make a culture that's able to change, how we rise above and always do the right thing. Most of us have values inside of our organizations of integrity. Well, that starts and begins. So go the leaders, so go the culture. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Some housekeeping for Zoom. If you don't mind, we love the chat. Just send it to all participants. If you don't mind, do me a favor, just send me all the questions via Q&A. And that way we can triage them for Jack. He'll take them at any time, and I'll make sure that we get to those. And then just raise your hand if you need help or you got a question of any kind. All right, Jack's got a great presentation for you today. I met Jack a couple of years ago. We were doing an event at Chapman & Co. and Barry Waymiller's facilities out in Aspen, Colorado. And we have some really nice facilities out there. And we were running this event. And it was from leaders all around the world. And it was a small kind of invite only. And Jack was one of the people that came, and he spoke about his form of leadership and what he was doing in the police department. He's very passionate about this. And I was moved by the talk because I saw every organization inside of his police department. But when the police department gets it wrong, they don't get the idea of we just had a bad customer service day. It doesn't work that way. And I know this is a very contentious subject right now. Contentious maybe isn't the right word. It's a subject that is of extreme importance and interest, as it should be. I want you to know Jack's one of the good guys, and he's trying to make other good guys. And so that's why we wanted him on this platform. I was moved when I heard his ideas, his talking, and the results that he has. He's got over 24 years in this, 9 years as a chief, and he's even a graduate, as you can see, of the FBI National Academy. Absolute honor and pleasure, Jack, to have you with us. I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, everybody, for joining me as we talk about building communities and leaders with one-by-one policing. I'd like to start off with a quote from Mother Teresa. Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time and always start with the person nearest you. And as it turns out, if you follow Mother Teresa, good things happen. I'd like to talk about our one-by-one policing philosophy. It's our purpose, our cause, it's our belief, it's why we do what we do. Specifically, it's to serve people one by one, so together we can create environments that are safe and secure where people can thrive. And ultimately, we're talking about relationships. We're talking about one-by-one relationships, connecting to each other as individuals. So let me break that down a little bit for you and what that means for us. And as I talk about one-by-one policing, please, you can go ahead and replace policing with leadership, because really that's what we're talking about here. So it's about serving people individually. It's shifting from the idea of serving a group of people to focusing on serving individuals one person at a time. And a lot of times in policing, we talk about serving our communities. And maybe in your business, you're talking about serving your customers, but shifting from a group of people to individuals. And it's about creating safe and secure environments and building that circle of safety that creates both a place that's physically and psychologically safe for not only all of our team members, but for our communities that we serve, for the customers we serve, because that's so important. And helping people thrive. So ultimately, we all want to thrive. And when individuals thrive within our organizations, and the communities they belong to are better positioned to thrive as well. So if we are serving our customers per se, we have to thrive first before we can help them thrive as well. And that's what this is all about. So I'd like to talk a little bit about culture. I want to start with some headlines that we've seen in recent years where there are examples of how a poor culture has resulted in negative results for certain companies. I think we're all familiar with most of these headlines. Boeing, certainly the 737 MAX, and how that was related to a toxic culture they had in their organization. Both Uber and McDonald's ended up ousting their CEOs because of a toxic workplace culture. And you may be familiar with the Houston Astros cheating scandal that occurred, and that was all based on some bad culture. And certainly there's Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo had a scandal about fake accounts that their employees were opening, all based on a culture that was driving money over people. And the result there was a $3 billion settlement to the Justice Department. So when culture gets it wrong, sometimes we see large settlements, or maybe employees don't get a bonus that year. But when the law enforcement gets good examples of businesses out there that get culture right and they have positive outcomes. Airbnb, WD-40, Southwest, and of course, Barry Waymiller are just some examples of great companies with positive results that come to us because of great cultures that they have produced and created within their workplaces. That brings me to some of the headlines that we've seen in policing. And I'll just kind of go over a couple of them. Police culture in America has lost its way. Reforming police culture is a daunting challenge. America's police on trial. The United States needs to overhaul its law enforcement system and counsel to conduct community meetings to discuss trust in police. And you know what's interesting about this is that I've been giving this type of talk for a couple of years now. All of these headlines for law enforcement, actually, I took pre-2020. So before 2020 occurred, and we know that 2020 had a lot of issues relating to law enforcement, that's what we were talking about. And when police get culture wrong, then we know exactly what happens. And this last summer, there's no better example. And I can't make it any clearer than when law enforcement gets it wrong, lives are on the line, literally. When private industry gets it wrong, there's bad things that happen as well. But we're talking about lives at stake here with law enforcement, which is why it's so important that law enforcement look at the culture that we are creating within our organizations so that we can keep all of our communities safe and secure. In law enforcement, we have actually done a pretty good job with involving with technological advances as our society has advanced. Certainly with body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, computers in the cars, license plate readers, all kinds of technology that we've been able to take advantage of and to move forward with as we provide services to our customers. We've also provided our officers, as generally speaking, with good training, equipment, and technology. But the glue that holds all that together is culture. And until we get culture right and spend as much time on the culture piece as we do the training, equipment, and technology, we're not going to be able to leverage those other pieces as well as we need to. And again, the goal for us is keeping our communities safe and secure. So it's really important for us as law enforcement to replace an authoritative culture. And for us, it's with one-by-one policing and the philosophy that is related to that. And if you think about it, in our business and maybe in some of your businesses, that years ago, the culture and the leadership style was based on one that was specifically authoritative in nature. And it was created in many cases by individuals from the Great Generation. And the greatest generation is called that because they did some great things. But the type of culture and the type of leadership style that existed back then doesn't mesh well with the modern world. And in policing, we have a unique culture within policing that is related to that. Because what's happened over the years is that the greatest generation leaders have taught the next generation, the baby boomers, the older baby boomers, the younger baby boomers, Gen X, and down the road. So unless we were able to change that and break that cycle, we're going to continue with an authoritative culture and one that doesn't mesh with today's values. So what does a toxic police culture look like? Well, it can be one that is a top-down, fear-based directive leadership style, where favoritism takes place within the organization, where there are competitive silos within the organization, where there's no trust between command, rank, and file people, where people feel undervalued, where they feel pressured to make numbers, and where people are treated poorly, from new hire to experienced people. And one thing that's unique about law enforcement is that, generally speaking, that you have a paramilitary style academy, and then when the officers leave the academy, they move into a training type of situation where they are trained by an experienced officer. And many times those officers are treated more like a pledge, if you will, in a fraternity or sorority where, you know, we don't really need to listen to you unless you have 12 months on or 18 months on the job. So we're really not treating our employees like we really need to, just into the door. So the experiences that they have when they first go into the organization is kind of negative, and we really need to change that. If you think about it, if a technology company is going to hire a software engineer, they're not treating those individuals like a pledge. They're treating them like they're a valued employee from day one. And that is something that's important for all of us, including law enforcement. Many reasons that we need to change the culture in law enforcement. One of them is the fact that we have external factors that we cannot control that officers operate in. They operate in high stress, dangerous situations that just come with the job. But what we can control for is our internal environment. So if we create an internal environment within our law enforcement organizations that is safe and secure, both physically and psychologically, our police officers are going to be much better suited to handle these high stress, dangerous situations. So if you think about it, if you are in a toxic work environment and then you are asked to go out and handle a high stress situation, the chances of having a good outcome is not as good as it's going to be as if you could create an environment within your organization that is safe and secure and where you're supported by the leadership. So one of the other areas of culture and why we need to change it is because prior to 2020, actually, we had a workforce crisis in policing. It's even more magnified now since 2020. It's difficult to retain, it's difficult to recruit and keep that good talent within our organization. So we need to have a really good, positive, strong culture to attract and retain that talent. Officer wellness, so important. And something that we need to focus on is to keep our employees within the organization well, both psychologically and physically. And then there's organizational trust. We ask our officers every day to go out into their communities to keep them safe, to put their lives on the line. And by the way, one more thing we ask them to do is earn the trust of the community, earn the trust of your customers. As law enforcement leaders and as leaders of any organization, we need to earn the trust of our employees first so that they are best capable of going out and earning the trust of those that we serve. And then if you wrap all that together, it all relates to officer safety. If you have all those in place and a good work culture, and you're providing support and the tools that your employees need, then for us, we're going to have safe employees. And that's so very, very important. One of the things that I began when I first started as chief back in 2002 at Castle Rock was to perform listening tours. So I met with every individual within our department, and I simply asked them, what is it that we're doing right? And what are some things that we can improve on? And so I heard all kinds of stories and some areas that we really need to look at. But one of them was this issue that was brought to my attention by our records ladies that work behind our counter at the police department in the lobby. So if you can imagine walking into a typical lobby at a police department, and there's a front desk there, we have some large windows that are placed high up near the ceiling that lets in a lot of natural light. And here in Colorado, we're blessed to have a lot of sunny days. But what was happening was when the sun would hit certain parts of the day, it would actually blind the ladies working behind the counter, and they couldn't see the customers walking in. So that was a problem for them. And they had asked just to simply have some blinds installed on the windows to help with that. So unfortunately, that request was denied, but they were given another option, and that was a visor. So they were asked to put a visor on during that particular time of the day to help with the sun so that they weren't blinded. Obviously, that wasn't a really good option for them, and it was problematic. And as simple as that might sound, what it did at the time was the ladies didn't feel like that they were being listened to, or that their safety was important to the leadership, and there was a lack of trust there. So that's just one example of many that I found that made a big difference. So we simply installed blinds, and you'd be amazed of how much that provided us as far as moving forward with that group of employees to earn their trust, and that they understood that we were listening to their needs and we were taking the appropriate action. So what that leads me to is simply listen to the individuals that we are responsible for leading, and taking small actions that can create a circle of safety that end up earning trust for the organization. So really, we're talking about small wins or small actions that result in big wins. And when we can create trust within our organization, then that's going to put us in a better position to earn the trust of those that we serve. You may have seen this pyramid before, but it's a result pyramid. And it all is based upon the bottom part, where the experiences move into beliefs, actions, and then results. And as I mentioned before, on how traditionally police officers are brought into organizations where they're not really valued as being employees. They're basically told, hey, we want to wait till you're here for 12 months or so. And when those experiences at the very beginning are poor and people are not treated as they're valued, then that kind of moves into the beliefs and actions, and then finally the results. So ultimately, if we have experiences that are negative and toxic, then our results are going to be the same. So think about your company. You have values, you have missions, mission statements, purpose statements, but those will never trump your people's experiences. So it's so important that the experiences that we provide our employees are positive and are going to drive positive results for whatever business that we are in. And remember, your customer service that you provide your customers, or that we provide the citizens that we serve, will never exceed the team experiences, which is why it's so important to provide those great experiences for our team members to begin with. So for us, it's all about earning community trust, and it's from the inside out. So we're earning trust with a community that starts within our organization. The picture to the right kind of shows a time that we had pre-pandemic. So this would have been in 2019, but we had what was called a splash mob, where we would invite the kids of the community to come out, and we'd have water gun fights. It was a lot of fun. And that's just one piece of earning trust with the community, where we can get together and just interact as people. And one thing that I've learned is leading from the heart impacts all people, regardless of profession. So it doesn't make any difference if we're talking about law enforcement or some other business. Leading from the heart is simply the important piece of what we're looking at. So I say, for all of us, including law enforcement, especially law enforcement, let's lead from the heart and create cultures based on compassion, empathy, initiative, and problem solving. I'd like to talk a little bit about what this all means when it comes down to putting it into practice. And for me, it's all about family. It's how we treat people. As I explained to our new employees, everyone that we come in contact with is a mom, dad, has brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles. And it's important that we treat each other like family. So for me, I go back to my mom. And this picture here shows her, she loved cars. So the picture on the left is her with in the 1960s, and then the one on the right is her in her car in the 90s. And one thing that really drove it home for me was that one day she was involved in a traffic crash. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there to comfort her. But I knew that the officer that was there at the scene was taking care of her members, like individuals, so that we can provide the best possible service. And these impacts and results are transformative. If you focus on problem solving and initiative and people, then your results are going to be related to that. So for us, it was moving from the mindset of traditional metrics versus problem solving initiative. Traditionally, law enforcement has looked at how they value employees based on certain types of metrics. For example, they may count the number of tickets and arrests as outputs so that they can evaluate the value of an employee. And that's an old way of thinking. What we really need to be looking at is looking at problem solving and initiative. And when you focus on that, then you're going to get more and more of problem solving and initiative. You're going to get more of the people piece of the puzzle of treating everyone like a family member. This plate here of pastries I put on here to represent a story. We had an officer that was at a stoplight one day. He noticed that the vehicle next to him had an expired plate, and he simply rolled down his window and told the lady, "Hey, just want to let you know your plate's expired. You may want to get that taken care of so you don't get stopped and perhaps get a ticket." Later on that day, that lady stopped by our police department with her 2 little kids and brought some pastries by and said, "I just want to thank you and your department for what you do." And I asked her, I said, "Well, you know, what motivated you to stop by today?" And she told me that story. And so what it tells me is, because we are focused on problem solving and initiative, and we're focused on treating everybody like a family member, as opposed to focusing on traditional metrics, the officer didn't feel compelled to stop that individual and issue a ticket or a warning. Simply roll down his window, because under the traditional metrics of tickets and arrest, the officer would have gotten credit for making a traffic stop and then perhaps credit for writing a ticket. In this case, he didn't have to worry about that. So that's why we had a really good outcome here. And that's why focusing on other things other than traditional metrics and problem solving initiative is a good thing. Strong culture for us has resulted in improved police performance. I think strong culture will result in improved performance for any organization. For us, a strong culture has been resilient. And I have a story about an individual that we hired from another agency. We do a pretty good job of hiring, but every once in a while we miss the mark and get it wrong. We hired a particular individual who came into our organization with prior police experience. So when he was in his training phase, what the officers who were training him found out was that he wasn't treating the citizens within our community like we asked our officers to. He was working outside the confines of our culture. And what ended up happening was our culture was so strong that that officer, after a couple of months, decided that he would leave our organization. And he actually came to me and said, "Hey, Chief, I appreciate the opportunity to work for your department, but this just isn't a good fit." So what happened here in this case was that our culture, because it's strong and resilient, actually gave a message to an officer that, yeah, how you're operating isn't consistent with our values and our culture, and it was time for him to move on. So that's the positive results that you can get from having a really good culture. These are just some words from some recent thanks that we have from the community. But if you look at some of the words people are using to describe their interactions with our employees, you see words like compassion and phenomenal and quality, appreciation, respect, dedication, gratitude. these are all the types of words that our community is telling us and giving feedback to us on how we're interacting with them. So that's just one piece of information that lets us know that we're moving in the right direction, that we're doing good as far as providing the service to our community. So kind of looking back at the one-by-one policing and what I've talked about, it is about impacts and results at the very end of the day, and about compassion and caring, and it's from the inside out. This type of a culture actually provides our employees to take risks and be creative as they solve problems. It's a culture that's consistent with de-escalation, because our internal culture is providing that type of psychological safety for our employees. It's an organization that provides less organizational stress. And what we do know is that in law enforcement and many other areas of employment, a lot of the stress for employees actually comes from the leaders within those organizations. And overall, our employee wellness has been positively impacted. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the results that we're seeing. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I bring to the forefront here is that if you ask questions, you have to be prepared for the results and do the work that you need to do to make the changes that you need to. So here's some questions that we had asked our community. We asked our community questions in a survey every 2 years. And as you can see here, our first question that I have is approachability. So that's basically measuring what's the approachability of our police officers, because we felt that was really important for us to measure. The next is confidence in police. And after that is the trust in police. As you can see, we have numbers in the 8s in most of these categories. We slipped a little bit in 2021 from 8.23 to 7.98. Some of that may be related to what we were seeing nationally, as well as the fact that we weren't able to connect as well with our community personally. But overall, those are pretty good scores that we're seeing. Other areas are 911 dispatchers receiving numbers in the high 8s there consistently over the last few years. Our professionalism from our police officers or the detectives are in the 8s. And then our front counter staff. So if you remember the story about the visor that I gave you, this is that group of employees. And you can see that they've rated in the 9s and then in high 8s. And then this last year, 9.25, which is just incredible. If I were to go back another couple of years prior to that first 9, then we were basically in the 6s for them. So as they moved from a toxic work area to one that they were supported, that we really did see their numbers climb. And then internally, we asked our employees questions surrounding particular areas. Some of those areas are, for example, wellness. So we scored at an 8.45 as a department on the type of resources that are accessible to our employees regarding wellness, both mentally and physically. Our culture, we asked a culture question. How do they feel about our culture? We scored it at 7.88. Certainly, we'd like to see those numbers, much higher than that, but we also know that we have some good numbers in the 8s and 9s and 10s. And so we know that we're on the right road, but we also know specifically, and especially as it pertains to culture, you're always having to work on that each and every single day. And then finally, we asked, how happy are you working at Castle Rock Police Department? And we had an 8.60 out of 83 respondents. So we felt pretty good about that our employees, for the most part, are happy working here. Again, we know we're on the right road, but we always have work to do. So some final thoughts. If you want to read a little bit more about our story, feel free to pick up a book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And he outlines a little bit more detail about our road to creating a good culture. And then finally, some homework for you to take away from this, and maybe you can implement some of this stuff. One of them is to study leadership together. It's so important that we get everybody on the same page. It's always nice to send employees to outside leadership training, but it's always a good idea too to study together. What we did is we used a book to do that. We first used Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Less book, and right now we're doing the Infinite Game. But basically, we bring our leadership team together, and for 12 or 13 weeks, we come together and we talk about the principles, the leadership principles in a book, how those apply to us, how we're doing well in some of those areas, and what areas we need to improve. And then reinforcing behavior you wish to see. Once you are clear with your why and your purpose, then reinforce those behaviors. Well, we do that on a regular basis. If we have information that comes in and feedback, then we'll make sure that the employees are recognized for that good behavior on a regular basis. Be clear with your expectations. If you see the expectations are a little bit off the mark, then make sure to meet with those teams and help them get to where we can be on target. As I mentioned before, listening, taking small actions, creating a circle of safety, and finally, earning the trust of those that you lead is so, so critical. And then don't forget about creating positive experiences. Experiences for our employees always leads to positive results for all of our organizations that we lead. So that's it for my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. So a couple questions here. One, how supportive are your leaders of the approach, like from a frontline leader perspective? And then the second question, when you get done with that one, how are you spreading this approach to other police departments?
Okay, yeah, good question. So on the first one, it's like anything else. It's a step-by-step process. What I found here was that we had the early adopters, if you will, of leaders who were more than willing to embrace the change. And so we had a good number of them that said, yeah, we've been waiting for something like this. Let's go. Let's embrace this change. But we also had some folks that, quite honestly, they had been living under the older system, the different system for 20 years or so, and it was a little bit more difficult for them to come around. But what I found was being consistent with your messages, supporting them, and being patient with that. We did get everybody to get on the same page. So just be patient and stay on target with your messaging.
Great, Jack. And I have a question. This one's coming in from the UK. How do you respond to cynical police chiefs who thinks that leading from the heart is for quote unquote softies, or that's not the way it does it? Like police needs to be hard.
Well, first of all, leading from the heart doesn't mean we're not holding people accountable. That's number one. But number two is that we've already seen what when we work with toxic cultures in law enforcement, what the results are. And what we're talking about here is providing a positive workplace culture and support for our employees so that they can better provide the service to our communities. So that's a good thing. And I don't see how anyone can argue why treating our people better and providing them the resources they need to do a good job is something that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. But I'll just throw a couple other ones in here. How, and not just since we're about a year after George Floyd, but not just the George Floyd, but when an incident comes up in the news about policing, whether it's body camera, those kind of things, how are you doing that inside of the group? But I'm asking for the police department, of course, with you, but I'm also thinking for any organization, when some organization does something unethical, how are you bringing that in and doing a training session on it? How does it become topical in your group?
Yeah, so we do use those stories and the videos regularly. We just had one example here in our state just a couple of weeks ago, and it was a poor example of providing good police service. And we use that. So what we'll do is we'll bring that video into roll call and we'll show it and we'll talk about, how could they have handled that better? What would we have done? What would our response have been? And we learn from that as well. But I think that's important to not only look at our own, our own service and how we can improve from what we do, but look at others as well, not only from policing, but also even other industries. We're always looking for ways to improve how we do business.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe if I can ask a couple of questions that are a little more contentious. Can you talk to me about defunding the police? Thoughts on that from just a logical, rational position from you?
Well, I think that, well, number one, it's a local decision. But two is, just today, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article on how some of the municipalities that were starting to defund the police are actually now backtracking and starting to refund them because the crime rates have been so high. The results have not been good already. So they're already starting to fund those police departments. But I think just from a logical standpoint, what team of individuals has ever been better because we provided less training and less resources and less support? And I think that if you look at it from that standpoint, defunding the police wouldn't be a good idea because we're wanting to improve police performance, not the opposite.
Thanks, Jack. I'm asking a question for you here from just a purely policing standpoint. Because I think one of the things that came up when you and I were talking about is what's the purpose of the police department? Was it to write tickets or was it to prevent the crime from ever occurring in the first place? How do you deal with, especially being in Colorado, and a lot of new states and communities are dealing with this, how are you dealing with different kind of drug issues?
Yeah, so, our number one priority for all of us is to create environments that are safe and secure, is having communities that are safe. And regardless if it's theft or if it's drug use or if it's, persons crimes, violent crimes, we just have to be flexible and always provide, the resources needed to address those issues. But the important piece of it as well is I go back to the trust part of it, and why it's so important to create that level of trust within our organization, because we have to create that trust and earn the trust within our communities so we can work together to approach those issues, because we can't do it just on our own. There's no way. We're in a community of 75,000 and we have 80 police officers. We need to work hand in hand in partnership with our community so that we can work together to have a safe community.
Yeah, thanks. I know you gave some tips out to folks about, well, how would I, start building more trust in my own organization? How do you teach customer service? Because essentially, when you're mentioning about being trusted members of the society, like how do you all go about just basic customer service? Like the example you gave of the police officer rolls in the window and says, literally, I'm going to be giving you a ticket later on. You should fix that. But being gracious enough to understand, I don't need to give you a ticket right now. How do you teach that?
Well, I think it starts within the organization. I keep going back to that, but it's the leaders, the supervisors that lead the teams, that they are creating that trust with their employees. So they're treating them fairly and equitably as individuals, and so that when you are in an organization like that, when your employees, whether it be police officers or other people, are out interacting with the community, then that translates into that automatically, because they know what's expected of them. They know that they're treated like that when they're at work, and they're treating their customers the same way. It also goes back to the metrics part that I talked about. That if your metrics is simply about counting particular numbers, then that's what you're going to get. But if you can look at focusing on other things as well, such as helping people, earning their trust, problem solving, and treating everyone like a family member, then that's what you're going to get. And so it depends on what your focus is. And for us, it's on.
Let's say, thanks. And let's say you were able to, and I know I'm making you kind of guess on this one, but let's say you were able to be in a room with every police chief in America. What percentage of police chiefs do you think kind of believe this similar kind of notion about how you've gone about transforming the Castle Rock Police Department?
Well, I think that this idea about changing culture and transforming the culture of police departments to one that we have created here is fairly new. It's not something that we have as a profession spent much time working on. Like I mentioned, we've worked a lot on the technology and the equipment piece of things, but we really haven't, as a profession, spent a lot of time on the culture piece of it, because that certain culture that we've had for decades is so ingrained that it just, we haven't done it. And I think that for us, we want to model what it can look like. We here at Castle Rock, we want to model this is what you can have for your employees and for your community. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of focus on the culture part of it. I understand there are chiefs out there that may be hesitant to do that, but my message is it works, and we need to spend as much time or more on changing our culture as we have in the other areas of our profession, such as technology and equipment.
Yeah. So then if that's the case, what happened to you? How come you turned out a little bit different ideas? Like, what's the inflection point, or what happens in your career that you go, we're going to do this a little bit differently?
I think it was incremental. And when I first became chief, I started just seeing how from the listening tours, I started understanding that what was happening was basically the experiences of the employees were, in many cases, not really good. And just from a humanistic standpoint, I didn't believe that was the right thing. And that it just came down to treating everybody with dignity and respect. I mean, that's how I grew up. That's what my parents taught me. And little by little, one by one, if you will, we started seeing some really good results from that. So that just led us into incrementally changing our culture to one to where we were able to bring clarity to what we've done with our one by one policing philosophy. And today, it's the foundation of what we do. You can ask any officer on our department or any employee what one by one policing is. It's our vision. They'll be able to tell you what it is.
Yeah. Let's just one last question here. Let's reverse this and go from the opposite side. So if I'm a citizen, and let's say I'm not in Castle Rock, I'm not in one of those one by one policing kind of environments, what's the advice, what's the perspective you give to all of us? Like, how can I help the police department do a little bit more of what you all are doing in my own community? What's your advice to us?
Well, I do think it comes down to building relationships and human connection. So what I would recommend is going to your police department and asking to meet with the leadership there and having some candid conversations about maybe your experiences, and see if you can talk to them about creating an environment where the police and the community are working together and learning about each other as people, and creating those good experiences. I think that once we all see the benefits of that we'll all come together and we'll be able to make this work.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I really appreciate your time today. Jack can be reached at jcawley@crgov.com. If you'd like some free resources, we're at ccoleadership.com/resources. Nothing to sell you there, just a bunch of videos, podcasts, stuff like this. So you're welcome to go there and grab that for you, your team. I think Jack had a really great point, was learn about leadership together. So bringing cohorts, bringing teams through together. And in this case, if you'd like, Everybody Matters. This Simon Sinek wrote the foreword, written by Bob Chapman and Rod Sosodi. All proceeds for that book go to charity. So if you'd like another good leadership book, in addition to the ones that Jack mentioned, Everybody Matters is another great one. Jack, my friend, always a pleasure to chat with you and have you on. And thank you for the good work you and your entire team are doing out there in Castle Rock. And I know that we have a few first responders on the line today. And thank you for the work that you do out there, keeping us safe and keeping us healthy. So best of everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.